Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cosmic Connections. I'm here with Christopher Pridham. We're going to be talking today about relationships and how we use astrology in relationships, looking at relationships. So we're going to have a nice little conversation. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And I also wanted to mention that on March 2nd of 2024, we are having an online workshop. You can check that out. The link will be in the description box, vibrationalastrologyconference.com. And you can read about it there. But I want to invite you guys to come and check us out. So how are you doing today, Christopher?
I'm doing well.
I'm
Yeah.
doing well. Yeah, me too. Great. So we're going to talk about relationships today and how we look at that in the charts of people that come to us and talk to us about their relationships. Is there anything like you would specifically go to look at, or just look at the overall? I know you're a big picture guy. When
Well, I
a
mean,
couple would come,
obviously, if I'm looking at relationships, one of the first things I look at is Venus. I want to see what Venus is connected with. I mean, that's like when someone talks about what about that, I sort of will look and see that's like a natural draw for me. Um,
yeah,
and then probably the next thing I look at is the nodes. I go to Venus and then I go straight off to the nodes. So I think so. All right. So everyone that is, um, thinking that about the sun sign of somebody or what this is or what that is, I will tell you straight off, none of that stuff freaking works. All right. That's
no,
if
it
you're just
doesn't.
thinking that a person, oh, I don't get along with Scorpios, so I can't. Okay, you're wrong. That's
You just
not
don't
how
know.
this works at all. So just if you're coming to this video and you're thinking that's what you're going to hear, that's not what you're going to hear. This is way more complex than um it's complex, and yet it's also sort of common knowledge. Like there's a certain um there's certain things you can look at and you'll see it in the chart that will tell you, is this going to work, is this not? Because I will tell you, if someone comes along and says, oh yeah, you always see this in a chart of a relationship, that's bull. You don't.
No, you
There are
don't.
so many
Mm-mm.
charts and so many couples I've looked at, and there's certain ones where I'll just look at the natal chart and put it up, the compatibility or the comparison between the two charts, and I'm like, ooh, I'm not seeing it, man. And yet they've been married for 30 years, and it's like, okay, something is working, but like off the top of your head, you don't always see it. Do you find that?
Yeah, I totally do find that, and on top of Venus, I do look at their Mars as well, and
Yeah.
are they connected to each other?
Yeah.
But I will look at the vibration charts. If there's nothing in the natal charts that seem to like open up to me, I will go right to like 9 vibe or even eight or seven, because seven's like internal working, and when we're in relationships, we open ourselves up, our internal selves up to the other person. So that would be something I would want to look at. And then also look at 9 vibe, how they connect with themselves plus others, in the community of whatever family or whatnot they're connected to. So I look at that. But I also, like, if I was just looking at the natal charts with each other, I would look at Venus and Mars, also Saturn, because Saturn has a lot to do with
Yeah.
how we can restrict each other, how we can kind of like, that's the traditional sense, thinking about Saturn and restrictions. And, I think there is some merit to that, but it's not all of
Well,
it with
yeah,
Saturn, but
where I
it
do the
can.
in the restrictions, the concept there is your commitment.
Yeah.
So Saturn as like, so the idea of a marriage commitment is a restriction. I'm restricting
Yeah, that's
myself to
true.
this person. So it is a restriction. Um, but it's, like restriction is oftentimes a negative connotation, and it's not. That's why Saturn gets a bad rap, because it is constricting. But when you build a house, you need Saturn, you need constriction. You're not just going to be open forever. You need to define
Yeah.
it.
You need the
And
bones.
yes, everything we make in the physical world has restrictions. Like
Yeah.
it has limitations. It's built to do this, it's built to do that, it's built in this way. You don't build it in that way. You build it in this. That's a Saturn thing. So
Hmm.
yeah, I like, if I'm looking at commitment levels, I'm looking at a Saturn. If I have a Saturn and Venus together there, oh yeah, this is a committed. There's a commitment here. So
Yeah.
you want to see that in a relationship chart. You want Saturn involved in the dynamics for sure. So that's one
Yeah.
thing to look at. Now, for those of you who um, maybe not astrologers, but you know how to look up a natal chart. One of the things I do, which is it's nice and it's easy, something that you can easily do, is you look at the fifth house cusp, the seventh house cusp, and the eighth house cusp. All right. So that's right there on the edge coming into the houses. And you want to look for the sign on that cusp. And how I use it is your romantic language or your style is that fifth house cusp. The commitment or the relationship style you see in the seventh house cusp. And then the intimacy is the eighth house cusp. So I use this as a form of language that you may have or you may match with a person who's really strong in your fifth house cusp. So let's say your fifth house cusp is a Gemini. All right. And this person is very verbal. Okay. So they are able to talk, and that's your romantic language is speech, is how the speech comes across. It may be in their mind, it's there in their communication. That's what you want to do. And it's wonderful in that romantic way. That really gets that going. But the relationship dynamic, maybe not. Or maybe it's that you'll see that people have strong romantic and then relationship, but intimacy isn't there.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
or you might have intimacy without and relationship and intimacy without romance. So
Mm-hmm.
really what you're wanting to do is to see what your language is. Now, people may so people have a sense maybe of what their romantic language is, because typically when I'm going over this with a couple, I'll say what it is and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's true." But I don't know if they could have said that before I said something. All right?
Mm.
I don't know if people are very consciously aware of their romantic language. When you do it, they say, I like it or I don't like it. That they're clear on. But to think in those terms, a lot of people aren't used to thinking in those terms. Some are, but a lot are not. So I'll usually give an illustration in, okay, this is where you are. This is what you would like. And they're typically, it's like, oh, absolutely, I'd like that. And then, if it's a couple you're dealing with, but this is where he's at and this is what he likes. And he's like, yep. And and then it's usually a, do you? Because they might not be the same. And typically they're not the same language. So
That's it. Yeah. I never thought of the houses in that way. And when you do this, you use equal houses, right?
yeah,
The
you
equal
can use
houses.
Placidus as well, but yeah, equals fine. I play with it a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
if I see that it's going to switch between Placidus and equal, I want to see that, and then I ask, because sometimes Placidus works fine. But
Yeah.
right now, yeah, I use more equal, especially in the nodes. I'll use equal. So,
Yeah.
um, but again, what this does is uh, again, if you're a couple and you're watching this and you're thinking, how can we look at our sort of relationship dynamic? That's what I would suggest. Look up. I think you can go. Oh, I think we have a thing where you can look up a chart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do. I can put a link in the description
Okay. So
box.
there'll be a link down there where you can actually put your information in and get yourself a free chart. Okay. So what
Mm-hmm.
you'll do is you'll look at where it says the fifth house and you'll look at the cusp, which is the line there, and you'll see a sign. You'll see a particular glyph of what sign that is, whether that be Gemini or Aries or whatever that is. And then you can just look up online somewhere. I mean, you can get it all over the place on what's the general attributes or the thought of, let's say, an Aries. So, okay, if you have Aries on your fifth, what's going to happen is you need some excitement. You need some adventure, and your romantic language is going to be adventurous. That's what it's going to be. This is not a person. So an Aries, so let's say you have one person has an Aries on their fifth and another person has Cancer on their fifth.
Mm.
Okay.
It might be a non-communicating energy. I mean, one is sweet and soft and gentle, and the other one is more, I'm going, I'm doing, I'm like the warrior.
So the Cancer would probably want to stay at home, cuddle up under the blanket with watch a movie, something like that. The Cancer would be, oh yes, that would be perfect. And the Aries would be like, oh
It's like,
hell
let's
no.
do this.
Let's go camping. Let's go hiking.
Skydiving.
Yes, let's do something. Okay. This would be how you romance someone. Okay. It's going to be that fifth house cusp. And I mean, it works. So
Hmm.
it's a really strong one to do. Now, again, that's just romance. That's not relationship or intimacy. And you don't want to get those confused, because you can have people who really connect romantically, but they can't be intimate.
Yeah.
All right. They just, it doesn't work, because the way your chart's set, that type of energy is not your dynamic. That's not how you see intimacy. All right. So you
Yeah.
really want to look at these to understand, again, it's understanding aspects of your being. It's not telling you what you are. It's giving you words that you can begin to, oh, I do that. I hadn't thought of it like that. Okay. So I find those are the kind of things you can get from this kind of practice of looking at that. So, for example, let's see here. So, my wife, her fifth house is Pisces. That's her fifth house.
Hmm.
That's her romance. Now, I'm a Pisces.
Yeah, you have a Pisces sun.
Right. Okay. So I'm Sun Pisces. Her fifth house cusp is Pisces. Okay. Easy. That's easy to see. Okay. Am I going to be able to manifest the Piscean dynamic in the romantic language that she needs to hear? Yes. Obviously, not a problem. Okay.
Right.
So, yeah. So, again, these are where you start looking. Now, mind you, her eighth house cusp is Gemini. So, her intimacy cusp is Gemini. I'm a Gemini ascendant. Okay. So, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, not a problem. So, you want to see how much of that dynamic do you have in your chart? How much of that energy do you possess? Because that's what's necessary in the relationship. Okay. You're not wanting to just see a sun sign. So she's an Aquarian sun. And if we just went off that, well, Aquarian and Pisces are usually good anyways. They're a good pair.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, what does that tell me about the fifth house, or that doesn't tell me anything. Okay.
Right. It doesn't
So
say anything.
yeah. So you want to look at that type of, those type of points. Again, I just find them to be a quick way, without going into depth, where my fifth house cusp is Libra. That's where my fifth house cusp is. And my seventh house is in Sagittarius, and my eighth is Capricorn. Okay. So
Mm.
now, where would I see that? So in my wife, her being an Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn, which also rules Capricorn. So what does that mean? So when you have an eighth house, when you have something in the eighth house in the place of intimacy, now intimacy, so you don't want to just think of intimacy as in a relationship as, oh, intimacy is sex. No, not necessarily. Okay, so sex can be in all three of these categories. You can have romantic sex, you can have relationship sex, you can have intimate sex. I would say this: very few people really get to intimate sex, because intimacy is a total vulnerability. It's really truly
Mhm.
opening yourself up, and people fear that. So, so you want to look at, what does it take to have the person open up? Well, for me, with a Capricorn, it means I have to have a certain amount of maturity. Someone cannot be treating it as like casual nothing. You know,
Mhm.
that would shut me down so fast. Okay, in that realm,
Mhm.
if it was just like a casual nothing, because I've got Capricorn on that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the kind of things that you can look for, again, quickly, to understand some of your dynamics without getting too much in depth. This is someone, you don't have to really know astrology to do this. Okay. You
Right.
can,
It's simple.
yeah, it's very simple, but it's powerful. Like it can really help and give a person, okay, what is the language, especially when you're trying to communicate to a partner. Like if you want to do something special, if you want to do something romantic, you don't always use your own, because if it's a Cancer Aries, you don't want the Cancer trying to come up with a plan for the Aries with their Cancerian, what they
No.
think is romantic. That's not going to work for the Aries. Okay.
Yeah.
It just won't. So, um, yeah,
Well, that's
that's
interesting. What about, so when I look at two people's charts, like as a biwheel with one chart in the center and the other chart in the outside, when
mhm,
I look at the angles, so the one for 3 and 10, of course, those
right.
specific points,
Yeah. Mhm,
if I see certain planets, particularly difficult planets, sometimes I would say difficult, potentially difficult planets, I should say it like that, because not everything is always difficult. But like for instance, Uranus on someone's descendant, or even their rising sign, another person's Uranus on their rising sign, or another person's Uranus on their descendant, I would say
right.
that could be a little bit of a unsettling situation. It might not be
Yeah.
immediately, or it might be that they found each other and they were like excited about each other, but it doesn't seem to last, But likewise, if
Good.
it's Saturn there, it might be a little bit slower moving and more lasting, more, involved. I love what you said too about Venus and Saturn, because I agree with that. I actually have two cats. I named Venus and Saturn, and got them at the same time, and they absolutely love each other. I make up a cute little story about them. They're my little lovers, they're so cute. But yeah, I think that Venus and Saturn has a great way to have establish, continuity, establish, real, honest, true love, not being afraid to open up and be themselves. Venus is that love and beauty, and Saturn is that energy of, I don't mind if you don't wear makeup, or you're just like sitting in your,
Right.
your comfy clothes. Like that's cool to
Yeah.
me because I'm doing it too. There's a
Right.
comfort in that, and I think that's
There's a
pretty
certain
beautiful.
reality. There's a stripping away
Yeah,
to reality on that one. Unlike
exactly.
unlike a Neptune Venus. A Neptune Venus,
It's
not
just
that way at
too
all.
dreamy. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's not unless there's something in there with the Neptune Venus to be established. It might be too dreamy, too sensitive, too kind of
Yeah.
not
So,
grounded to
yes,
establish yourself.
most
That's what I
definitely.
see. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, so if I'm so for me, when you're going into depth in a relationship, where they talk about opposites attract. Well, that's bull as far as I'm concerned. Opposites do not attract.
Yeah, I agree with that
Sameness
too.
attracts. Okay,
You
in a
you need
chart,
something of the same.
because you
Yeah.
need to be able to communicate. All right, so you need to and really when you get to sameness, what I want in same is big picture here. All right, you need to kind of want the same things in life, and you can look at a chart like, and this is where you get to the nodal axis. So there's only been a couple clients that I have actually advised, yeah, their relationship, it's doomed. Like there's no way. I don't care what they do, it's not going to work. There's only been like a couple people that I've actually said that to.
Mm,
And what ended up, and it was true. But one was their nodal axis was like opposite. So,
mm,
and in this particular case, they were both moving in very opposite directions as they developed, as they got older. Okay.
yeah.
So, what was happening is they were growing apart, and one was pulling the other back to what they had been. All right. And this was not working. And it wasn't where they didn't love each other, they did. But it's like when you marry, if you're in a relationship with someone, you're not the way a person's developing and evolving, they're not going to be the same person in 20 years. Okay.
Mm-mm.
If everything's going right, they will not be. Now, their core being, yes, that never changes. But how they manifest, what they do, sort of what they like, what they want may change over time. It may develop as they evolve. All right. So It's like you want to make sure that you're going to grow together. That's one of the things I look at in looking at young couples. Like, do they have the ability to grow together, or will they grow apart? Is that what's going to happen? Now, again, I don't always say these things unless people really want to know. I mean, you don't want to have a young couple who's just gotten married and say, "Oh, you guys are going to grow apart." That's
No, try to
not
encourage
what I'm
them.
going to say. Yes, because okay, I can see that, and that may be a very real reality that I look at. But there's a reason why they're together now, and we can make that work. Just because, like, yeah, this is probably going to end. That's fine. It may end. You know, we want things to be permanent, but they're not always that way. So, but there's a purpose for why you're together. There's something that's drawn you together that you need to learn. So you want to encourage them towards that. That's what you want to do. All right.
Yeah.
This is why you're here. But so, I mean, would I always recommend someone, a couple that are beginning to date, maybe they're starting to get serious, that they might want to do that? Yes, you might. Is it that you're going to hear that this is temporary? Unless you ask, you're not going to hear it. Like,
Yeah.
what would you say? Because there's a reason why you're drawn to the person. All right. Now, it may be that you're drawn to the person because your fifth house just connects wonderfully, that you have a romantic spark, but the seventh and eighth do not. And you don't have all the qualities to sustain a relationship. Like, it's not sustainable. That is
Right.
possible. Do you want to know that or not? That's, I mean, those can be hard things to handle. Because if you got a great romantic relationship, now what I would do is I would never say, okay, so in that situation, I'm never going to say an absolute no, but we're going to
Right. I
talk
always
about issues.
I try to guide them towards understanding each other when I'm in a situation like that. If the person, I can see that the one person is very different than the other, I try to guide them at least to understanding, in hopes that they can at least hear what the other person says, because I see that happens sometimes. Sometimes they don't like understand the energy of the other person. That's what I do in a situation like that. I try
Absolutely.
to, yeah,
Yeah,
because then
you
it
want to see
gives them
where
a
they
chance.
connect. Okay, so they've come in, so they're connected somewhere. See where they're
Yeah.
connected. For me, it's a matter of you talk about that. You talk about where you're connected, where you're strong. I will deal with weaknesses. I'll say, okay, so for example, if we were dealing with that Aries Cancer, I would talk about that. Realize your romantic language is very different. Okay. You have to talk about that. Because that, when people see that, so what might we have here? If, let's say that the gal is a Cancer and the guy's an Aries, and they've come in, and you can see that he really is infatuated with this gal. Oh, she's wonderful. And probably is. But in that romantic language, he is probably yielding his Ariesness, and to where, like, because he has to be safer, he has to do that. Like, that's not going to last forever.
Right. You
Okay.
eventually become, the veil falls and you become yourself in front of
And
the
he's
person.
thinking,
Yeah.
oh, I can get her to to maybe like some of these things. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So you want to understand that up front,
Yeah.
that his idea of an amazing romantic trip might be skydiving, which that
Yeah.
Cancer, if they're strong, is going to be, oh, hell no. That's never happening. Okay. Now, again,
Mhm.
is that a deal breaker? Not necessarily, because you have to look at the whole chart. You have to look at, all right, what is connected? If I look at, okay, so I've got Starlene's chart up here. So your fifth house is Virgo.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, oh my God, there's already a problem here.
Feel so seen.
And then seventh is Scorpio, and
Yeah,
eighth
that's a big
is
problem.
Sagittarius. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh boy. So what does that tell me? So what that would tell me is there's the romantic language in Virgo is this would be someone who, if you were to take them out to eat, you are taking them out to a fairly fancy kind of place that's like white and like everything is set to like just be perfect. It's beautiful. Okay. It's just like the whole setting to me is going to be pristine. There's going to be something
Yes.
pristine about it that is
Pristine.
just like, wow. Like, I see in my head, there's gold accents, that there's like a white rose in the center of with the gold, uh, what do they call them? The chargers, the gold chargers with the plate. Like it just is a wow kind of like, oh my God. So you're going to overwhelm with quality, with something that really is just absolutely gorgeous. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm going to, if someone's coming in and, oh, I was going to take Starlene out, what should I do? That's where I would say, go do that. All right. Now, in relationship being Scorpio, how the conversation, I would say go deep. Do not go
Yeah.
shallow. Go deep. That's what if someone who can't go deep, she's never going to even like there's no chance of a relationship. You have to go deep. You have to be able to it's not shallow talk. Scorpio on the 7th is not shallow talk. Someone they're going to have a relationship, they want to go deep. That's what they want. Okay? So that's where I'm saying that. I'm saying take her to this place in the conversation, ask her about her life, talk about your own life, talk about these things, talk about things that matter to you. Don't keep it light and shallow. Go deep. She'll like that. Okay. And then when you're dealing with intimacy, when you're dealing with open, you have to express a very open mind because it's Sagittarius. You've got to be
Mm-hmm.
open to a lot of things. If you're like this is what I believe, this is what I've always believed, and this is what I'll always believe. Oh my God. What that does is that'll shut down the intimacy. I may like this. I can have a relationship with this person, but I can't be vulnerable because if I really open myself up, I'm going to say something that offends them. I'm going to do something. And so that'll shut you right down is how I would describe it. Okay.
Mm.
That's where I would go on that. Like, no, you got to be open. So you have to be deep, you have to be open, and you want something that's like pristine, that's right. That let's say it has a master chef. You're going there and there's a master chef there. Something where that's like, ooh, this is really, it has that Virgo sort of quality of mastery and like service, and it's there. It's like it just has a quality to it. It's not a hole in the wall that, oh yeah, the food's good, but it's a hole in the wall. Nah, let's skip that one for the romance. So that's that's where I would go on that. Um again, this is just one way you can sort of look at a chart
Mm-hmm.
and get a feel for like, okay, who is this person? And if you're looking at stuff then and you're wanting to see, are they compatible? What are they compatible with? You want to look at, again, sun, moon, Mars, like a lot of the planets. You want to look at that. People need to be able to communicate. You
Yeah.
know, uh,
Mercury. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you want to see, okay, what do they have connecting in their Mercury? Or what do they have connecting in their 3rd house or 9th house? Where are these things? There's not one way to find it. That's a
Right.
reality. And then when you get to the vibrations, again, yeah, a 7 vibe, a 9 vibe, these are all really good. They will, uh, again, this is for more astrologers, not just someone who's kind of glancing at things. That can be a little more difficult when you're doing that. Um, but you want to get into the holistic view of, do these charts work? So now, for me, I'm what working on 30. We're almost to year 35. We're just a month and a couple weeks away from 35 years married. Okay,
Wow.
so that's a check. Like it's not like I don't know what I'm talking about in relationships. With
Yeah.
8 children, and they're all like 5 are not. Well, 4 are married. The 5th is engaged, we look at all the charts. Okay, so we've gone over all the charts and talk about it. Like I'll talk about it with all the kids. Like, okay, this is how this one's going to be. This is how that one's going to be. And I'll talk about it with the couple. So, um, to me, that's our house. That's what we do. We talk about those things. Like, oh yeah, if it's my son or one of my sons, yeah, he does this and he's gonna like that. And okay, she's this way, and we'll laugh because you have to understand who a person is. Like,
Yeah.
you can see where there's potentially conflict, and when I say conflict, I mean there can be misunderstandings. Like this person's wanting to do that, and the other person's wanting to do something different. They're less comfortable with that. Can they find a way? And you need to see within the chart, can they find a way? Sometimes no. So they just go off and do that. So for me, what I would advise, let's say on that Cancer Aries person, let him go skydiving. Don't have a problem. Don't have a problem with it. Okay. You don't have to go. But if you try to withhold from him doing this, there's going to be a problem. You're going to have a problem down the line. I mean, he may be able to do it for a while, or she may be able to do it for a while, but they
Right.
need to manifest that energy. They need to, and
Eventually, yeah.
yes, they've got to do
Eventually it
something
comes
that's
out.
risky. Aries has to do something risky, and Cancer is risk avoidance.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to
They want the
understand
comfort.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I take a Virgo, so Virgo has to do, like, it has to be right. It has to be right. Okay. Where you could take, again, you could go back to Aries and no, it just has to be exciting. It doesn't have to be right. Okay.
Yeah.
You can see a little conflict there, you know? Um,
Hmm.
so you want to talk about where there can be issues of impasse or misunderstanding. Right now, if I'm looking at a person, let's say who's an Aries, let's say someone has that fifth house Aries and another person has a Sagittarius on the fifth house. Are we going to have a problem with those two? Oh, hell no. They're probably going to
Yeah.
get
They're going to
along
be
great.
excited. Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to get along great. They're
Yep.
both going to be up for the adventure. They're coming from different dynamics, but both have that fire element that wants excitement. And so you can always look within the elements. If you're within the element on those things, you're going
Hmm.
to be pretty good. If you're
Yeah.
matching elements, you're going to be good.
Yeah, that's
So,
really helpful too. I know there's an old idea of a man's sun and a woman's moon being in the same sign. I haven't found Have you found that to work? Because I've seen a lot of people talk about that. Oh, if you're Aquarius sun, the man has or Aquarius sun and you're a man, and then the woman has an Aquarius moon, they're supposed to get together. I haven't found that to work in romantic relationships, but I will say in friendships, I have found that to be a commonality where you can see that they vibe, but that doesn't mean that they're the happily ever after relationship type situation. They can understand each other emotionally, intellectually, that kind of thing. But I haven't found that to be a case in romantic relationships. Have you?
yeah, not really. No. I mean, I
Yeah.
do look at the Mars and Venus as the Mars in your chart represents the masculine you're attracted to, and the Venus in your chart represents the feminine. And so I
Yeah.
do that. And I do find that to be pretty good. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And the Mars is also like that raw physical attraction thing. So if there's something that's, maybe Saturn, someone else's Saturn is on their Mars, that might not mean you're going to be sexually, physically, with each
yeah,
other in the
no.
same way. It might
Yeah.
not. So, but if
It's
it's
very
complementary,
interesting too. You can find, okay, so for example, with my wife, um, so and the dynamics of her chart where she has a Scorpio ascendant and Scorpio moon. And it was so funny. I was just with another couple, and she has a Scorpio ascendant and he has a Scorpio moon. Now, I
mm,
get along fine with them. Why? Because there are elements of my wife that I
that's
recognize.
funny.
Okay. So, when you're with somebody, you kind of learn the dynamics. That's what you learn. And,
Yeah.
hopefully you can learn to appreciate them. because it's not like I have all this Scorpio in my chart. That's not the case. Scorpio for me is a 6th house dynamic. All right. So, and the only actual planet I have there is Neptune. So it's not like, oh, Scorpio is just a massive thing for me. You would think, not really. Uh, but I am surrounded by Scorpios. All right. Like,
Yeah.
very much so. So, and I understand the Scorpio really well. But so you really want to get into, again, the holistic, there's just a lot of things to look at. So there isn't one thing. So when anybody, again, when you get the idea that, oh, I don't ever like Geminis, or I don't ever like Scorpios. And I hear that all the time. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and
Gemini
then
gets the
you find
worst.
out, the person's a Scorpio ascendant. And oh, I hate Scorpios. It's like, yeah, that's the Scorpio in you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, okay, no, you're very Scorpio. Then they're all of a sudden, oh, really? And then their tune changes real quick.
That's
It's
funny.
sun signs are, again, yes, they're real. There's a
They're
power
a
to
little
them, but they're
tiny
not the
part.
totality of it. Yeah, they're not the totality of everything.
Yeah.
Um, and you just need to, like, again, when you get into the chart, but you don't have to be an astrologer to do some of this stuff. I will tell you
No,
that
if you
straight up.
look up your chart, you can see where your planets are and the other person's planets are and understand that part of it, or even just the signs like Christopher was talking about, and the house cusp signs. Those also
Yeah.
mean something. And yeah, I can see that too. When you look at the nodes, let's go back to that for a minute, because when
Yeah.
you look at the nodes, so of course there's the north and south node, and they're opposite of each other always. When you were talking about nodes opposite of each other, so someone's north node on their south node and vice versa, um I have had a few friendships in my own personal life where I got really close with someone like that, like super close, like weird close, quick. And then it was like we were passing each other because they
Yeah.
didn't last. They were not romantic relationships, they were friendships, but
Yeah.
they were like, oh wow, our nodes are in the same spot, but opposite. And then it was just
Yeah.
like whoop, and we ended up like going different directions, not on a negative way. It just happened that
Yeah.
way. So
Yeah.
that seemed to happen. But what about if the nodes were in the same degree for
So
each of
if
the
they're in the
person?
same, okay, if they're in the same, you have to be very aware of it, and you have to sort of commit to work on it together. Now, the tendency is you're gonna egg on the negative aspects, because so the whole nodal concept is you're trying to incorporate the north node qualities into your life. You're trying to incorporate those to balance out that north and south. So the idea is not where, for me, the idea is not where I want to move from my south to my north. No, I want to incorporate the north and bring me to the middle. That's what I want to do. Okay. So I want to be between my north and south nodes. I want to incorporate, but I have to incorporate more north node qualities. Okay. So, like for myself, I'm a 7 to 1. So, which is in that Libra, in a sense, the Libra to Aries. I have to learn to be more standalone, pioneer, do my own thing, say what I want. Now, mine happens to be in Gemini. My North Node is an Aries Gemini. I need to be able to say what I think and not try to compromise myself and say, well, I don't need to say that. Other people can do it. And, or I can go along with what they say and I'll be okay. That is my default. Okay. Now, if I have another person who defaults that way,
Mm.
then it's going to be, should I go out and just say it? And then be like, you can leave it for somebody else because they're working on that too, you know?
Yeah.
So, it can be difficult. And that's why you just have to be very aware of it,
Hmm.
where your nodal access is. And is this person going to be a help, or are they going to encourage you towards not advancing because they haven't? You know, so
Right. Kind of
age,
like hindering
yes,
a
it
little bit.
can. It
Yeah.
can. Now,
Yeah.
again, it doesn't mean it will, because there may be other factors involved. It's
Of
just
course.
something to consider.
Yeah.
The nodal axis, like if I see someone, I will tell you a difficult one. So a 410 and a 10-4. Okay, if that's the relationship. So let's say you're the 410. So a 410 is you need to move more into a public kind of way, standing out, leading, doing that. A 10-4 is you need to move more into a nurturing quality. You need to be able to create a safe environment. It's like you need to be in a 10-4, you need to be able to accept people where they are and love them where they are, and deal with that. Where a 410 is you're pushing people, you're pushing yourself, you're pushing people to really to take it on and do it. Just come on, do it. That's what you've got. So if you have people in the opposite, ooh, that's a difficult dynamic,
Yeah.
because you can easily slip back to just being, well, we just need to love them as they are. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, that's not a bad thing. But if you're a 410, no, you don't need to do that. You need to be able to take a stand out. I'll give you an example. Now, this is not totally in a relational dynamic, but I'll give you an example of a person who succeeded in it and a person who failed, and they are 410. And that is Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are both 410s.
Hmm.
Okay. So 4 is it's more family oriented. It's more the group. It's more just accept things as they are. 10 is I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to stand out there and be the leader. Okay. So as we know, Trump ran, got the presidency. Bernie yielded to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
That was a mistake on his part. On a 410, a 10 you need to take the lead. You need to do this. Okay? You don't need to yield. And he yielded. Wrong. Incorrect. He should not have yielded. He could have been president, but he yielded. And
Hmm.
so, okay, uh, was he getting the right encouragement? Was that happening? No. I mean, Hillary was a 1-7. Okay. That's what her note is. She needed to work in partnership more than just being the individual. But I think she got burned in the Bill Clinton partnership, and she yielded back into that. Just do the Aries thing. Don't try to do the Libra. Don't try to work with them. So she was going the wrong way when she was saying, I'm going to run and do this. That was the wrong move for her. She would have been better in a support for Bernie. That would have been the proper astrological dynamic that would have worked if she had supported and, let's say, even been a running mate or a VP for Bernie. That would have worked. Energetically, that would have worked. That would have been a very powerful combination. And I think it would have won, personally. That would have won.
Yeah.
Because when you're not moving in your actual dynamic, in your intended dynamic, people know it. There's something off. There's something wrong. Okay. This isn't right. And I think a lot of people knew Bernie should, they were to this day, they're pissed that he didn't step up, and because that was his energy dynamic, was to step up and take that role.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
So
didn't own it though.
he
That was the
didn't. He
thing.
did not
He
do it. He
didn't.
yielded back. He went back. Both Hillary and Bernie stepped into their south node. They did not move into a north node dynamic. Okay. So in looking at a relationship, you're always wanting to encourage a person to move into that more of those north node qualities. You need to incorporate those, and you want to encourage those. So when you see a couple, let's say, so let's say you have someone and you're a 410 and you are marrying someone who has a 10th house sun. Is this going to be good for you? It actually is, because they have
Maybe, yeah.
qualities you admire
Yeah.
that you're going to want to incorporate for yourself as well. This is going to be good. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's what I look. Those are some of the things I would look at, is
Mhm.
how is the overall story of the person going? And are they going to be able to work together to encourage each other in their evolution, in their development? Will they encourage each other, or will they be a hindrance? Now, I don't think it's just straight off. It's very rare that you can look at a chart and say, this person will hinder them. That's rare. It's not impossible, but it's rare. But can they consciously be aware in order to know what to encourage? And yes, this is where the charts come into play, that you can know. Okay, so if I'm looking here at Starlene's in a 2 to 8, okay, do I know then that Starlene needs to, how would I say this? She needs to confront deep inner dynamics. She needs to understand what makes herself tick, what makes others tick. If she's telling me, yes, I'm a 2-8 and I am in astrology, I'm learning that. Does that fit to a 2-8 model? Oh, 100% it does. Because it
Yeah.
wants to get to the reality. It wants to get to the truth. It wants to dig down. Okay. So if she's telling me, or she's married to someone and they're saying, no, you don't need to really do that. You can just do this other thing and relax and stay at home. You don't need to pursue any of those things. Oh, no. That's
No,
why. That's why. So that 2-8 dynamic is also why you have Scorpio on your 7th in your relationship, because you need someone who
I
appreciates
need that
that.
intensity.
You
Yeah.
do need that. So you need, that's why if you look at a chart, it's built a certain way for a reason. Okay. You
Mhm.
need that in the dynamic because you need to be encouraged to go deeper. You know, it's like, nope, that's too shallow. You need to go further. You need to go further. That's a part of the dynamic. So that's what I would look at. So anybody you would be with, I would look to see, do they have a propensity? Do we see that in the harmonics? Do we see it anywhere where they want to dig deeper? They have a curiosity and an openness and wanting to dig deeper. If they do not have that, it's,
Yeah. I can say that's definitely been a thing for me in the past where it's like, oh, I just don't know. It doesn't work out because if someone's too, I don't know, in this world, I should say it like that, then, in the
yeah,
philosophy of
if they're just
themselves,
very
even.
material, if they're material and
Yes, that
surfacey
just doesn't
oriented,
work for me.
which there is
Yeah.
nothing wrong with material and
No, it's
surface
just not
oriented.
me. Yeah. And I mean,
But
I
yes,
like material things, but, everybody does on some
well, when
level.
you deal
We're
with the
living in the
material, you're
body.
dealing only with the physical manifestations of what works instead of the motivations of why. It doesn't
Yeah.
so much get to that, where you're built to want to understand the whys of things, not just the what of things. So,
Yeah.
again, um, there isn't a right way and a wrong way. There's who you are and who the other person is. And can these come together in a very cooperative way? That's what you want, like a way that, oh, this is going to work really good because here you're trying to do this and they're going to be able to help you do that. They're trying to do this other thing. You're going to be able to help them do that. That's awesome. That's what you want,
Right.
no matter what it is. For me, with my 8 kids, they're all different. So the kind of people they marry, they need to be different. Like with my 2 daughters, their intentions in life are different. Their courses are
Mhm.
different. So one needs to go one way, one needs to go another way. And it's not where, oh, this way's better, this way's right, that way's no. This is how
Mm-mm.
you're built, and you need to do
Yeah.
that, and you need to have a partner who's going to be good with that. Again, if you're linked with someone who, let's say they're a very strong Taurus, they have a lot of strong Taurus energy, a lot of strong Taurus energy, a lot of things there. And let's say they have a lot of strong Taurus and Cancer energy. That's what they have. And they're like, it's all down bottom of the chart. Let's say a lot of second house, no third house, not a lot of in the third house, a lot of fourth house, maybe sixth house. Okay, this is like they're all heavy down there. And if they're Taurus, let's say let's say their Mercury is, we'll put it in Taurus. I'm not going to give it to Aries, or I'm not going to give it to Gemini because that would be a good thing. I'm going to put it in Taurus. I'm going to make this thing like, oh man, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to be like, oh boy. This, oh no, this is not going to like, this is all, now, this is all, can this person have a good life? Absolutely. Can they provide? Can they be a good provider? 100%, a great
That's what they're
provider.
really good at.
Very good at being a
It's like the
provider.
material provider. Yes,
Is
absolutely.
this going to be someone that you're having late night conversations with in depth? Oh, hell
If you
no.
like snoring.
Yeah. So, I would need to see a lot more into, oh boy.
Need something else in there.
Yeah. Like if that Mercury had slipped into Gemini, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
there would be
I
some
can see that.
chatty, yes, liveliness
I
in
can see
there.
where we might go somewhere with that. All right. But without that, it gets, again, things can get to be very difficult. Like what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the chart and I'm going to do my typical smile because it's like, oh, okay, I can see a problem here. And again, it's not a problem in the fact that it's bad. It's that's difficult to navigate. This is
Right,
like, it's
it's
a
a thing you have to
challenge.
learn. Right, exactly, and work with the person and be open to understanding them as a different person, and I think
Yes,
you've said this before, but I think that's the beauty of astrology. It gives us an idea of how we all function a little differently and gives you the appreciation for the other person, and that they might be completely different than you, but you can still appreciate them for who they are. So, I think that's why it's really good to
absolutely.
look at the charts together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, when you get to, composite charts are really wonderful too, to
Yeah.
do, where this is where you are uniting the charts together into one new chart. What does the couple make? What do they form? What is the dynamic? That one's, I find it to be very powerful as a tool for describing who you are as a couple, not who you are individually, but who you are as a couple. And that's a dynamic in and of itself. But again, I don't think there is any one answer that is, oh yeah, this is an absolute. I mean, obviously you want the Venus, but I was just looking at a couple that's been married for years, and their Venus, it connects in the vibrational charts. It doesn't connect in the natal chart, but it does
Mm.
connect in the vibrational charts. And one thing I want to say about the concept of connecting in a vibrational chart, what you're looking at in a vibrational chart is you're looking at where the energy manifests. All right. So the definition of the vibration is where the energy manifests. So if you're in a seventh, it's very interior. It has a deep committed level. And so when you see let's say a Venus Sun connection or a Venus Moon connection or even a Venus Mars in a seventh vibe, wow, this is a deep committed love. That's what that is. So it has that. And you won't necessarily see that just straight off in a natal chart. All right. So
Right.
that's where the vibe can get to. You might see that in a ninth vibe. Okay. If you're seeing it in a ninth vibe, this gives me almost the concept of a family. Like this
Yeah,
couple,
because it's a community.
individuals, do they have a love? Yes, but really when they come together and they form a family, this is where the love bond really ignites and manifests. This is where the love manifests. And is that good? It is. That's not a bad thing. Okay? That's not a bad thing. I think too often some astrologers go at, or people who begin to learn this at the beginning, they go at it where it needs to have certain things, and they're not broad or holistic enough to see that everything isn't about massive passion. Okay. They want,
Right.
oh,
I
look
mean,
at
that's
that.
great for one part of the relationship anyway. You have to have the
Yes,
the whole thing or else it's just that. So yeah.
there
And
was
that
one
that means
couple, the other couple that I had recommended to, that yeah, that this wasn't going to work. They had their Mars and Venus connected on both sides.
oh,
Okay. You want to talk about passion? Oh my God, massive passion. But the person's, one of them had their Saturn right on the Uranus of the other. And the
Oh.
other was an Aquarian, massive to Uranus, massive in the moment, massive free, needed to free to be that creative self. And the other one wanted to control. And that's how it was perceived. And literally you could see on one face, on that one being controlled, they went ashy gray.
Mm.
And
Wow.
it's like, it's not that the person that wanted the control, I mean, that's how they were built. Saturn was
Right.
massive for them. So control, all those kind of things. And the other person was totally about spontaneous, in the moment, free. Okay, that's not going to work. So all the passion in the world kept them together for a few years, but it was never going to hold that marriage. It
Yeah.
was unsustainable. But they had a
Yeah.
lot of passion.
Yeah. When you're talking about that stability and, happily ever after type thing, you have to have that. Otherwise, it's difficult. Just all
If you
around
can't be
difficult.
you, if being
Yeah.
with the person stifles you from being you, then oh boy, this is not a formula that's going to work. Okay?
Yeah.
So now for me, that's going to be a massive sensitivity being a 7-1. Because being a 7-1, that's the concept, is you've allowed a relationship to dominate and control you. Okay? To where you weren't
Hmm.
your Aries individual self. So for myself, it's a sensitivity. I will see that and pick up on that in a chart because I'm built to do that. Okay?
Yeah.
It's an issue. It's an issue that I have to deal with because of who I am. That, can I do that? Can I yield myself to another in a relationship to the point where I'm not really being myself? Yes, I can. I have the potential for that. That's why I've
Hmm.
always had to, that's why I had to marry who I married. That's why I had to, because I need to be that strong individual too. And I need someone who's going to support a strong individual and doesn't need someone just to do whatever the hell they want.
Right. And when you say 7-1, you're talking about 7 is the
House.
south node, and then
Yeah.
the
And the north
one would
node is
be,
in the one.
yeah, this the south node is the seventh house, and the north
Yep.
node. Yeah,
You're
you
going
always
from a
say the
7 to
first,
1. You always
yeah,
need to
the
say that
south
where you're
node
coming
first. Yeah.
from, and the qualities you need to incorporate. So it's the
Yeah.
qualities you
Yeah.
need to incorporate. That's why that 410 is coming from a Cancerian, sort of a home, a safe environment, to a very public figure, to a public leading
The
figure
10th
in the
house. Yeah,
10th.
yeah.
Yes. To maybe someone who's in the home and yet they need to have a career outside the home. If you're a 410, that's typically the way it's going to go. You need to have a public career, and so they could have been, let's say in their past, they have a sense of, I'm just going to be a housewife, but you're really made to be a CEO. That's a
Right.
410 dynamic. Okay. But it can be hard. Now a 10-4 is a CEO who needs to be more in the home.
In the house.
Who
Yeah.
needs to,
Wants to be
yes, they
more
need to,
nurtured mom, all
yes,
that.
yes, they
Yeah.
need to have that, which I'll tell you, those are hard because our culture encourages the 10 and diminishes the 4. That's a
Yeah, it
cultural
does.
thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like our culture fights against the evolutionary push for you to do that.
Yeah, sadly,
Where
it does.
for me, the culture pushes for me to go to my 7-1. The culture pushes
Right, to
that.
be independent. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, and again, depending on the culture you're in, it's going to say, is the culture helping me to do this or is it hurting me? And so that becomes
Yeah.
a factor in it too. If my daughter-in-law, who's Indian, from India, um, their culture defines a woman very differently than our culture does, in the sense of the qualities they admire in India are different than the qualities we would admire here.
Hmm.
So in their terminology, she would not make a good wife because she's too independent, she's too headstrong, she's too, okay, she's not compliant enough, which we love. Like, great, that's what she needs to be.
Well,
She
that's
doesn't
the
need to be
American
compliant.
thing, right? Be independent.
Exactly. So this culture,
Yeah.
oh no, we admire those traits.
Right.
Okay.
That's
So you
funny.
read it differently. You
Yeah.
read it differently. Yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, have you noticed with people on the like the first and seventh house cusp, like relationships, have you noticed when planets were there that there was some kind of certain vibe? I've noticed for me, when people I mean, specifically the seventh house cusp, because that is our partnerships and our connections to people. But for me, I've had a few people in my life that had the Scorpio sun on my descendant on the seventh house cusp. And it always seemed to be that those relationships drained me. like, oh, it was just hard, it was just, it felt like I was, maybe that is also me just like giving something into that person, but I've always felt like they were pulling something from me. And so whenever that's specifically the sun, um, um, I didn't notice that with other planets except maybe Uranus, but that would be more like a relational thing because if the person
Okay.
has Uranus
So
on the
now,
seventh.
okay, now why it would for you? All right. Because your seventh house cusp is Scorpio and your north
Yeah.
node is Scorpio. So it's wanting you to incorporate a lot of those things. Is that going to drain you? It will.
Yeah.
It's very specific to you. It would definitely be a draining thing. You could see that because you
And then
want to go in
it's,
depth. Go ahead.
yeah, and what's funny is that when I have people in my life, and they're not romantic relationships either or that I'm talking about, but relationships that where people have the sun on my ascendant, my first house cusp, I am seriously, they just are like my best friends. They're like so close to them. They're like the
On which
perfect,
one? Your first house cusp?
yeah, when they're
Yeah.
when like they have a son or some a big, part of themselves are
Oh,
on
yeah.
my ascendant, that just
Yeah.
makes me flourish.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. Because it's
interesting
not,
how,
it's fun. It's not a draining energy. Like,
yeah,
you know, it's like, okay, that's not going to be a draining energy. There are, like, for me, now, see, I don't find that people on my seventh house cusp, oh, that's going to be Sagittarius. That's just
yeah,
fun.
so you have more fun
So
with it.
I'm not going to, that's not going to be an issue at all.
Yeah,
That'll be
that
absolutely
makes a lot of
fun.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah. It really depends on what's there, and how the
right, the
person's
flavor of the
made.
zodiac. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, again, that totally makes sense for you. Like, oh
yeah.
yeah, if they're on your seventh house cusp, that's like, oh yeah, that's going to be a
And it
draining
seems
thing.
weird because they seem to, like, gravitate to me, people with those birthdays or, there's I say
Of
birthdays
course,
because their son on that time, I'm like,
because they want to go in
"Why is
depth.
it another person
They
with the"
want to go in depth. They want to go deep.
And
That's
I
the
love
whole concept.
Scorpios, generally speaking, I love
But it
Scorpio
doesn't
energy
mean that it isn't
people, but
draining.
that
It
yeah,
doesn't
but it
mean
can
it
be
isn't
really
draining.
right. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very interesting how
it's
that works.
draining. So a Scorpio is
Mhm.
going to drain you. That's just the way. It's not a bad thing, but it's like,
No,
oh my god.
it's it's almost because you like the idea of Scorpio melding with the other person, like really fusing with the other person. That is what maybe is the draining part of it. I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is kind of like that.
yeah. I mean, for me, again, with that Sagittarius, this is just about optimistic,
Go and have
fun,
fun.
fire. Yeah, go have fun. So yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. You know, where I get drained is like in work, which is where my Scorpio is in the sixth house. Because
Yeah.
it has that. So with that Scorpio there, it digs down. So it has, so the work ends up being an element. It has to be real deep. There has to be a real truth to it, because then I've got my moon in Virgo, so it has that perfectionist. So my work, that's why I always talk about my dream world. So my dream world, which again, my Neptune is in that sixth house Scorpio. So what do I dream about? Work. Doing it right. It's horrible.
Making it beautiful.
Making it right. Like, and that's, yes, it's beautiful, but it's less about it. Beauty's a part of it, but it has to be right. Like, yeah, it's not, it's like, talk about a boring dream world. Oh my God. Yeah, not good. But it's like, okay, do I understand it? Yeah, I get it. I get it. Um, but then again, for me, with that Neptune, it's actually in a total opposition to Jupiter, which is in
Yeah.
Taurus in the 12th. Okay. So Jupiter, Taurus in the 12th, that deals in the whole spiritual realm, the whole, that's why for me, it's about taking spiritual realities and physical them, Taurus them, bring them down to earth. Like let's make it practical. Let's do that. Let's let that philosophy be there. We're not going to lose the sense of spirit, the Neptune. We're not going to lose that, but we're going to make it practical is what we're going to do. So
Yeah.
it ties that in. And so a lot of my thought goes into that sort of sphere as well. But
Yeah.
yeah. So again, in looking at charts, again, if you're gonna check that out and you're gonna see your chart and maybe your partners, or if you're dating someone, try it out, check that 5th, the 7th, and the 8th houses, see what sign is on there, and it should help you to know at least how to have a great date. You can at least plan that and
Yeah.
understand what the conversation needs to be about, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that definitely helps. And that's
you know?
simple. It's something you can do just by looking up your own natal
Yeah,
chart. You don't have to go into the crazy astrology part of it that, we'll kind of get into deep with at times, but it will help you to understand just at least the nuances of the person. And I really like how you
absolutely.
laid that out with those houses too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's a fun little thing to do, but it's effective, it's gonna help you. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say as far as some of the basics in relationships, unless you're going into real depth. But don't get caught up in moon or sun, or like, oh, that person has that, and then that can't work. It just isn't. It's not true. So
Yeah, that's I mean, I think it's funny with some of the memes or whatever you'll see online, but like they have nothing behind them at all. It's just
zero.
silly. They for me
Yeah.
they're funny, but that's about it. Like it doesn't work.
Well, it tends to piss me off because they're misrepresenting, and people actually think
That's
that's what it
true.
is, and that's what I don't
Yeah.
like. Is like, we're already fighting an uphill battle with astrology as it is because people don't understand it and think it's something it's not.
Right.
So when you're fighting that, and then you have all these things, oh, I don't, Sagittarians are this, and I see this list, and it's like, oh my God, that's not Sagittarian, that's not Sagittarian. Doesn't mean a
Yeah.
Sagittarian can't do that, but it's not coming from the dynamic of Sagittarius.
Right,
So
exactly. Yeah, I see that a lot too. It's kind of like, what?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's like, come on. So whatever. All right. Well, at least the two that are good in relationships and everything had this talk, and the two that weren't not so good in relationships, they weren't here tonight. So
They'll be back next week. That's really funny. Oh my goodness. Well, this was a fun talk, and I hope that it gave you guys, the listeners here, something to think about and to look at with your own charts. Love to hear how this works in your chart, if it does or doesn't. It would be nice to know. So, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
awesome.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye.